Happy New Year to the Hoops podcast. I'm Thomas Frank Carr, holding serve in the Big Ten. Penn State gets a home win against Iowa. They lose a tough one on the road at Michigan. Now a big game for a lot of different reasons coming up on Sunday against Purdue at the Palestra. We'll talk about that with the insider and expert himself for Penn State basketball. That's Nate Bauer. Hoops podcast starts now. The new year, which means it's the thick of basketball season. Nate Bauer with me, as always, the star of the Hoops podcast, really the star of wherever he shows up. Nate?
Oh, stop.
It's been a minute since we've had a chance to do the show. I'm glad we have a chance this week finally. After the holidays and the craziness of the travel schedule for bowl games, we're back into the rhythm of it.
Yeah, I took some of the podcasting stuff to California, but football, sad as it is for anyone who's listening to this and is a Penn State basketball fan, football still takes precedence in the pecking order. But guess what? Rose Bowl's done.
Yep.
Not a ton to direct our attention towards on the football front, and so here we are. Let's we can dive right into basketball. And actually, I mean, honestly, not that there hasn't been any compelling seasons in recent memory. Certainly, the 2020 year was very compelling until the world ended, but
until it was suddenly over.
But this is comparable, right? I mean, this is a Penn State team that, if there had been doubts previously, and certainly I understand, people who are hesitant to go all in on the belief that this is a good basketball team, but it's a good basketball team, and they've demonstrated that, and should be some really interesting games here over the next couple of days and weeks.
I just want to, for people who might not have seen it during an NFL Sunday, a very brief synopsis of the game where they win at home against Iowa, because I don't want that to go under the radar, because that was a big win. I know we're going to be talking about Michigan and recapping that game. And, of course, the big thing is previewing the Palestra, previewing the Purdue game again at the Palestra. We'll be previewing it later. But Iowa was a big win, and it came at a time where there was a ton of stuff on the sports calendar. So give us the nutshell of how Penn State played in that game and kind of went down for fans maybe who want to recap it or may have missed it because of everything going on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat. It's sort of brief, but they led. They had 15-20 point lead in the first half, and Iowa got hot in the second half, and Penn State needed to make a play right down the stretch. Penn State found itself in a position where it was a 2-point-ish game, and Seth Lundy got a steal, and that was it. Yeah. That was it. So the last minute was certainly much more nerve-wracking for Penn State than Penn State would have preferred, given the fact that it had played well enough to establish a pretty big lead. But if there are lessons to draw, it is on both ends of the spectrum, right? Is Penn State found itself in a game that it had a big lead and lost it in that game, and then followed it with a game at Michigan where they were on the wrong end of a lead and were able to climb back into it. Right. And so the notion that Penn State is either in control of a game or out of a game is neither one applies. It's certainly a team that can heat up or cool down very, very quickly.
That's exactly what I was going to thinking during the second half against Michigan. It's a perfect segue. I was watching that on the couch sitting there and saying, okay, it's 47-59 or whatever it was. I'm like, okay, this game's over, but basketball doesn't work like that. And this team especially doesn't work like that. And they're in it, but ultimately, the final couple minutes don't go their way. It wasn't a clean game no matter what, either half for Penn State, right? I think that's the first place to start.
Yeah, they didn't shoot well. They didn't shoot well.
Mhm.
I thought that they missed quite a few bunnies. The good looks at the rim. It was really interesting seeing Jalen Pickett's stat line after the fact. I didn't think that he played particularly well. He scored 26 points
You
and
you
had
have a
9
high
rebounds.
threshold for him playing well.
I just it's gotten to a point where maybe it's my own bias, but I expect every shot that he takes in the paint to go in,
Right.
and so many of them were good to above average looks that
Yeah.
they were halfway down and rattled in and out, and so like I'm going to sit here and say, oh, it's just one of those nights for Jalen Pickett, but when just one of those nights is 26 points and 9 rebounds. Certainly they got into him in terms of his assists.
Mhm.
I thought that he sets up some good looks for others,
Yeah.
but shots just didn't fall. It's
Can I put it a
it's
different way?
go.
Another thing I was thinking during the game is that they had 50 points and Jalen Pickett had 21 of them, and I said, "Gee, it'd be nice if somebody else other than Jalen Pickett could make a basket in this game." Like it was a
Yeah,
struggle, and the more it was put on him, the more he had to go into the paint. And some good looks, but then sometimes he's fading away with a 7'1" center in his face, and
right.
he drains it, and it's just like it's going to be one of those nights.
Yeah.
That's going to be the theme tonight.
And from the onset, that was the case. Is Seth Lundy was going and Pickett was going, and nobody else really was. And when like you just need more from a Miles Dredd, right?
Mhm.
A guy who scored his 1,000th point the other night, but went 1 of 4 from 3 and had some clutch looks, deep looks
Yeah.
late that
Yep.
just didn't go in. Andrew Funk was I'm not going to call him a culprit because he was dealing with impossible conditions, and this is something that we talked about on Thursday with Funk and with Micah Shrewsbury. Is these guys, like, teams are guarding him, right? It's just it is unconventional. It is not unfathomable, but like the amount of resources, the lack of help coming off of him, it's just really hard. It's just very, very difficult for him to get open looks against teams and opponents that are determined to take him out of the game.
Is that a
But what
surprise?
um no, because he's made shots, and so
Mhm.
that's it. Look, this has been something that I think that we've talked about from the beginning of the season. Once they put it on film of guard Jalen Pickett with bigger, uh, whether it's wings or forwards, what have you,
Right.
give Jalen Pickett a bigger matchup, and then paste somebody. You a good perimeter defender. Get somebody on Funk and don't leave him. What is supposed to happen from that is open looks for others.
Yeah.
That, like, bottom
Everybody
line.
else.
Bottom line is everybody else is supposed to get good looks, and in some cases that happened. They just didn't have enough shots fall, and there were other elements, right? The officiating was
Interesting.
candidly interesting, right? Like, that's a very diplomatic way to put it.
Yeah.
There was a major imbalance of free throw shooting. Michigan got to the line, shot 25 shots at the free throw line. Penn State had 11. And some of that was occurred down the stretch as Michigan went to the free throw line in the last minute or so.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
generally speaking, it just seemed like an imbalance whistle for a good part of the game. So yeah, no, I mean, you got to make
Let me
shots.
ask you
And
one
Penn State did
follow
it.
up to that. One follow up to that is something that I just have noticed in basketball is when you've got guys that have an exceptional skill, size, speed, ball handling, and they force the issue. It seems to me that officiating sort of follows that. So if you're fast and you're supposed to be blowing by people, and maybe the other team's playing good defense, or is that a fair assessment of how that kind of works out sometimes is Michigan had some big guys and they had some really fast guys and they had like a good blend of talent that was pushing Penn State, I think, at times to the maximum of what their defense was capable of. So then naturally, of course they're supposed to get fouled because look how fast that guy is. Like,
right.
Is that a fair assessment of how that works, or is it just home court advantage and the whistle favored Michigan because home field bias?
Yeah, I think that the challenge is the notion that, look, Penn State took 28 3-pointers. Michigan took 19. Okay. And so if you have that type of imbalance in shot selection, you're not going to get to the line on 3-point shots for the most part. Like that's not something that you expect. The challenge, I think, for Penn State is getting Jalen Pickett to the line. Right. Conventionally speaking, you're talking about Hunter Dickinson, who, is right. He's getting fouled every trip down the court and is in the paint, and his game, so much of that time is spent there. But so much of Jalen Pickett's time is also spent in the paint that you would think, and look, like, is it so huge that it's egregious and stop the presses? No, but it plays a factor. It plays a factor in a game like that, and the flow of the game and the pace and so on and so forth. But, look, the bottom line for Penn State remains, even with that element, you got to make, there were key moments in the game, not just the fact that Penn State shot 32% from 3-point for the game. It's that the misses occurred when it really mattered, right? Is Penn State's in a game where, in the last 4 minutes, 3 minutes and 11 seconds, they're down 2-17 after Cam Winter makes a shot. So like Penn State had a great look at, I want to say the 1:30 moment ish left in the game, in a shot that could have tied the game for Funk, and it didn't go down. And you win some, you lose some, and that was the takeaway from Micah Shrewsbury on Thursday was, hey, you can either be bummed about this, which is fine, and certainly I think there was a certain level of disappointment, obviously, in losing that game, because you feel like you could have won it. But also, if you're gonna leave that game and have a loss and not play very well, but still have had an opportunity to win, you got to be sort of encouraged by that you cannot play your best on the road and still have an opportunity against a Michigan team that's pretty good.
The role players and that part of the game, I think we kind of hit on it on the Penn State side, but on the Michigan side, in the reverse, they were good. They made those clutch plays down the stretch.
Yeah. And so, certainly Dickinson, it's just, I think that Penn State fans, the general sentiment is, Penn State's just going to get killed by post players because Penn State isn't getting anything from its post players. And that's true. Penn State isn't getting anything out of its 5 spot, but it's not so one-sided. Luka Garza a few years ago had 40 points or whatever it was. He put up 30 plus against Penn State. Dickinson didn't do that. Right? Like Dickinson ended up in this game with 17 points on 6 of 10 shooting. He had 6 rebounds in 32 minutes. Like that's not, you can live with that. If you're Penn State, you can live with that. What you can't live with is Doug McDaniel going for 12, Bufkin going for 14, Jet Howard going for 14. Like these are players that Penn State just couldn't really keep in check. And so those plays, when they were made, again, I mean, it just down the stretch, I think it was Bufkin that really got him. Right. And so that's, it is what it is.
It's Penn State Hoops Podcast. I'm Thomas Frankard. That's Nate Bauer. We're going to be wrapping up the game here, reviewing what happened against Michigan and previewing the game of the Palestra. But if you're watching here on YouTube, please like the video, share with your friends. We're still growing the show here on the YouTube channel. Another thing is when this show comes out, obviously the holidays were a thing. We're still working on getting a consistent time because basketball does not have a consistent schedule. And we try to make it so that you guys know when and where to find the podcast. That being said, look for it later in the week. So if you've been listening to the podcast, we appreciate all the support out the gate. We want to reward you by being consistently reliable, and right now that's kind of our aiming target is after Wednesday or after Wednesday afternoon. You can look for the podcast. We'll get you more as we go on. But please like the video here on YouTube. Help us grow this particular side of things. The defense for Penn State against Michigan. Have you seen their defensive effort and performance over the last couple of games? And is that part of the not playing well? Because I think we focus on the shooting, but there is another side of the game, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Certainly giving up almost 80 points is not something that Micah Shrewsbury wants or is comfortable with. They're not turning teams over, and that's to be expected. Penn State turned the ball over themselves a little bit more than they probably would have liked. But yeah, it's is it this massive lapse in defense? I don't think so. I don't think that's the issue. Look, Michigan shot 46% for the game and 42% from three. And then again had 17 points at the free throw line to 8 for Penn State. That's the difference. That's the ball game right there. So I think that there are probably things that they could quibble with, and that they're going to look to improve upon for the game on Sunday. But I haven't seen it as a trend. Put it that way. It's not something that I think is at the point of panic, that Penn State all of a sudden is becoming a bad or lacking in discipline defensive team.
Strangely, Mike's muting themselves. Big game coming up here. Penn State at the Palestra Sunday evening. So this is prime time spot.
Yep.
Where do you want to start the conversation about this game? What is the thing that sticks out to you most?
That's a great question, because to me, there are these two competing, overwhelming storylines. And it's similar. I think I mentioned this beforehand. It's like a Ohio State whiteout game for football. On the one hand, you have this event, right? Penn State playing basketball at the Palestra. The two prior instances that they've had of this, in 2017 against Michigan State, and then 2020 against Iowa, both were wins for Penn State. Both were just rousing successes. They were wildly successful. The atmosphere is nuts. It's awesome. The whole spectacle of it is just really, really powerful, and something that is so atypical for Penn State basketball to have a home crowd. It's just, there's a lot about that. Also, they're playing the number one team in the country. Right. So,
right.
If you're Penn State basketball, let's be honest about this. You're not expecting that. Certainly internally, they're expecting to beat Purdue. That's the goal. You play to win the game. Externally, no one should expect Penn State to win this game, but it doesn't mean that it's not an opportunity. If you have to play Purdue and you're going to get this team that is something of a juggernaut, obviously being ranked as highly as they are, even though they do have a loss to Rutgers that they sustained recently. If you're going to do it, to have it with the backing of it's literally a whiteout crowd. They're asking people to wear white for this game, but to do so at the Palestra, that's a little feather in your cap. That's a backing that you can work with. So
honest to God, home court advantage, right?
An honest to God home court advantage, no doubt. So that's, but that said, let's start with Purdue, because Purdue is, just kind of the latest and next game of a early season stretch that, in terms of the Big Ten, that is just, I mean, it's brutal. It is just really, really tough.
Illinois, Michigan State, Iowa, Michigan, Purdue. Whew.
And then Indiana.
Right.
Right. Then Indiana, then at Wisconsin before you finally get Nebraska on January 21st. So it is just kind of tough team after tough team after tough team on this schedule. And again, this is a home game. So if we're talking about holding serve and how you kind of, game plan out the home and away schedule, right? You gotta win your games at home. You gotta hold serve. If you lose games on the road, well, this is a home game, right? So if Penn State loses, which sure they very much could, then you got to find one on the backside of that. So it just remains very, very difficult.
So what is this environment like? I agree with you. Watching it on TV, it's exciting. It's what you see at big time basketball programs. So what is it like for the crowd, for people that are there?
Yeah, it's packed and it's hot. The hot thing is the thing that sticks out to me is like it, even on cold days in January, it has been consistently boiling in that gym, and and it's old, and for anybody who's
poorly ventilated, and
I mean, anybody who's in Philadelphia, I believe there was snow on the ground for the last game, and it was snowing for that Iowa game. But no, the venue itself, if you haven't been to the Palestra, if this is your first trip to the Palestra, get there early enough to walk around, because the hallways, the main concourse is just filled with cool stuff, right? Like old pictures, trophies, memorabilia, you name it. Like the history is baked into the building, and you can sense it, you can feel it. It's great. It truly is. I am not a novelty guy necessarily, having done this for as long as I have, but like the novelty is still rich on this one. Like this is something that I personally am very much looking forward to, just to catch a game, in this building of significance. It should be very, very cool.
Now, we just talked about Michigan getting a home court advantage in the game, and how that may have partially been part of the story of Penn State losing that game on Wednesday night. Is there some home cooking here for the Nittany Lions? We talked about the atmosphere as a home court advantage. Can they capitalize on that? Is that something you could see them being able to do? This particular team.
Yeah, I think yes. Zach Edey's going to get fouled. Zach Edey's going to go to the free throw line a ton of times. But yeah, is there a possibility of Penn State having the home crowd work to its advantage? Definitely. Your hope is, if you're a Penn State fan, is twofold. On the one side, you want to make sure that Purdue is rattled, right? Like you just hope to catch them on an off night where they're not going. Now, some teams very clearly will be juiced by being in that environment and having that type of a game, but you never know. Right. But that's something that you could hope for if you're Penn State. And then on the converse side, it's, hey, get hot, right? Andrew Funk is playing in front of friends and family, his home crowd. Seth Lundy is playing in front of friends and family, his home crowd. Like all of those things are your primary players. Some of your primary players are having an opportunity to be in this space and play in front of people that they know and venues that they're familiar with. Seth Lundy has played games. Roman Catholic played games clearly at the Palestra. Andrew Funk, same deal, right? And so this is an opportunity. Cam Winters played games at the Palestra. So yeah, you would hope that Penn State would have a certain level of comfort in that environment and be able to maximize it.
So tell me about Purdue. What have you seen from them? What are the important matchups or factors that you see that is going to play a factor on Sunday?
Yeah. So I pulled a few things. They take a ton of free throws. They're 17th nationally in free throws taken at 17 21.1 made per game and 22.7 attempts per game at the free throw line, which is 26th. So like that's what they do is they get fouled and they go to the free throw line and they score a ton of points there. They rebound the heck out of the ball. Penn State's rebounding actually this season has not been this massive deficiency that, right. I mean, it's not good. It's not good.
Yeah.
Offensive, like Penn State is literally the worst offensive rebounding team in the country because they don't try. Like it's right. But defensive rebounds per game, they're fine.
They do make up for it. I'll say they do make up for it. And this is base, like very uneducated. A lot of effort goes into getting some of those rebounds because they don't have a guy that can just do this and go get the basketball. Whoops.
Yeah.
So they are going after all the loose balls and they're able to, find some holes in that. But yeah, they're making it work even if it's not a strength of theirs. Clearly.
Yeah. Purdue does not force turnovers. I said that previously, but Penn State hasn't given up turnovers themselves. So like that should be a status quo, right?
Yeah.
Nothing's
both
really
teams take care of the basketball, and
both teams take care of the basketball. They're not a great 3-point shooting team. That's not one of their strengths. They don't shoot a ton and they don't make a ton. And the thing that I think stands out somewhat for a number one team in the country, clearly I'm speaking to a Penn State fan base here that's looking for silver linings. Purdue hasn't been dominant in the Big Ten. And certainly the sample size is somewhat limited, but they're 3-1 in the Big Ten. They beat Minnesota handily by 19 points earlier in December, but it took them overtime to win at Nebraska. Look out, Nebraska might not be a walk in the park this year. They lost to Rutgers 65-64, and then they won last night on Thursday night. We're recording this on Friday, 71-69 at Ohio State. So those are close. Like those have been close games that Purdue has been in. Which hey, if you're Penn State, that's not exactly a murderer's row lineup there. Nebraska, Rutgers, Ohio State. And all of those games have been close or they lost in one case. So,
yeah. I mean, you could, and I don't remember every game. I apologize. But Penn State's games have also been close, but that's more expected, right? Like they've played in all of these very close games, but Purdue should be, what you're saying is Purdue should be the team as a number one seed, number one team in the nation that has a signature dominant victory, right?
Yeah. Just look at their margin of victory is 14.5 points. Like their scoring margin for the season is 14.5 plus 14.5 points, which is 20th nationally. So like they've beaten up a ton of teams this year. Like they boat raced Duke, right? So like this is a team who has experience really running it up and stuffing it down people's throats, and that has not been the case, at least more recently, for them in the Big Ten.
You mentioned all the guys on the team that are from Philly. You mentioned you're going to be in Philly. This has to have a whiteout recruiting impact for the program. Micah Shrewsbury came on the show, talked about recruiting in a lot of honest and open ways, and I think some very encouraging ways. So what can this game do for the team, irrespective of the outcome, but also if they were to get an upset win here?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I don't know if this is like, well, I do know. This isn't, I'm so overwhelmed by this experience that I'm going to commit on the spot, right? So for Penn State's recruits that are in attendance, of which I am expecting a handful that I'll share with you here in a moment, it's not that. It's not that. But what it is, and I think that this is more powerful to the program in the long term, is an opportunity to demonstrate to all of the players in Philly AAU basketball what Penn State is, right? Like all of those relationships that they have, all of those coaches, all of the handlers and the people that kind of make things go in the region. Hey, here's a chance to get them to a Penn State game where Penn State is being supported. It's tough in the middle of a season. It's tough in the middle of January, obviously, to get guys up to Penn State, right? It's not convenient. They don't have home weekend Saturday games. So like here it is. Is you get a Sunday evening game in Philly, 15 minutes from a lot of these guys' front door. And you can demonstrate that. You can show that to them of what a powerful Penn State backing looks like for basketball.
Does this Palestra game need to be a regular thing in every year? Kind of like the wrestling at the BJC. Does this need to be an every year thing for Penn State? Because it has been great when they've done it, but they've only done it a couple of times now.
Yeah, they're gonna lose. It just depends, right? If Purdue wins this game, then fine. Maybe you're able to pitch it but the opponent has to agree to it. It's not as simple as Penn State to say, oh, well, we're going to take our toughest game every year and put it in the Palestra and you guys better just buckle up. No, Tom Izzo agreed to it. Afterwards, he said, I'm paraphrasing, they lost, Michigan State lost. And he sat in the post game and was like, I must be the dumbest guy in college basketball. Like I was so looking forward to this, to have this opportunity. I really wanted to coach a game here. Fran McCaffrey was not happy. Like these are guys, the old school coaches in the league who have not coached a game at the Palestra and want to cross it off their bucket list. Like they've been willing in the past to do this. In this case, it's Matt Painter, who obviously Micah Shrewsbury worked closely with at Purdue. Yeah. Like, so those are the connections that make it work. But if you're pitching, I don't know, like if you're pitching the rest of the league, you might be met with a little bit more resistance to being willing to play in this game.
That makes sense. And that's interesting that like that undercurrent isn't always discussed. Yeah. So you had a list of names for us. Can you give us the names and a little bit of context so that people who, for the people who don't know anything about basketball recruiting, will be able to have some context for it?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is like the deep cut stuff because not only do a lot of people not follow Penn State basketball, a lot of people really don't follow Penn State basketball recruiting. No, there are a handful of guys that I can confirm are intending to be at this game. Don't hold it to me if they don't show up. But Matt Gilhool, the center out of Westtown, Jaleel Bethia is expected to be here. He's a shooting guard in the class of 2024. Thomas Sorber, who is a high priority recruit for them, class of 2024 at Archbishop Wood. It was funny on Thursday when Micah Shrewsbury met with the media. He was talking about Andrew Funk, and he's done this a few times now, like very smoothly, talking about how Penn State was thrilled to have somebody from Archbishop Wood, and it would be great to be able to continue that pipeline, like we really love our relationship with Archbishop Wood. And if there were ever opportunities in the future for other Archbishop Wood players, hey, guess what? Two guys from Archbishop Wood, class of 2024, Thomas Sorber, class of 2025, Deuce Maxey, are both expected to be at this game. So that's a big one. And then Christian Bliss and Luke Bevilacqua, both George School products. One, Bliss is 2024 and Bevilacqua is 2025. He's a center. So those, high profile, right? Like, these are the guys. It is a tough ticket. I will say that, like, and everybody knows that at this point. It's a limited gym, right? You only have so many seats to go around. But in general, my understanding is it is very, very difficult forget the public, for recruits, like for recruits, for coaches, you name it. There's just a limited allotment of bodies that you can get into the building, which in some ways is even better, right? Because if you're Penn State and you're prioritizing certain players, it really lets them understand where they fall in the spectrum of Penn State's priorities for recruiting.
Anything else? Game coming up on Sunday. Is it 6 p.m.?
Yep, 6 o'clock on the Big Ten Network. Now it's, we'll see. We'll see what happens. And a game worth it's funny. I asked Seth Lundy on Thursday about, what, like, is this just not that it's ever going to be just another game on the calendar, but for how long have you been looking forward to this?
Mm-hmm.
Because like this is the send off in a lot of ways, right? Like Seth Lundy's probably not coming back for a bonus year of eligibility. This is his game. This is the love letter to Seth Lundy from Penn State basketball of, hey, you get to play this game in this gym that's significant to you. Maximize it. Make the most of it and get that opportunity and do it in front of the people that you love and that love you. It should be great. It really should be, win or lose for Penn State. It is an event that it continues to be cool.
That'll do it today for the Hoops podcast. Nate, with a final word there about the game coming up tomorrow. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure you leave a notification. I'm doing this backwards. Make sure you leave a comment on the podcast side and hit notifications on the YouTube channel so you don't miss when the Hoops podcast goes live on YouTube. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Before I drop another inlet pass, we're going to get out of here. Talk to you next week.